Finance Minister Setekwe has justified moves for a possible issue of Ghana's third Eurobond in July despite concerns of unfavorable market conditions. Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, has warned Ghana could be taking on too much debt in dollars through the issuance of the Eurobond. She says the practice has the potential to further harm the country's economy. Now, Sami Ampa is head of research at Gold Coast Fund Management. Let's look at this over the next few minutes. He's joined us via Skype. Hello, Sami.
Hi, how are you?
Sami, our best move now is to look into a third Eurobond issuance?
Come again, your question, I did not hear it well.
Right, I'm asking. The IMF is warning of increasing debt on the as far as Eurobond is concerned. Meanwhile, the finance minister has justified that, in fact, we can look into a third Eurobond issuance in July. Your thoughts or interpretations into this?
Well, clearly the IMF is just giving us a caution of our debt portfolio. Currently, we have a debt portfolio which is over 52% of our GDP. So it's clear that their concerns are that we are incurring a lot of debt, and then the debt servicing ratio is also going up. And monies that should be used for other infrastructure development should be going into servicing the debt. That is the worry. If you're an economy that is not productive and you have a high level of debt, it still turns the economy up. Clearly, the other thing is about the yield. I mean, we are going to pay a higher yield. If you look at the general economy at the moment, the macroeconomic instability is one key reason why we should worry about a higher yield. All over the continent, Ghana seems to be the only country that is paying higher on its bond. The recent 3-year bond that was released is paying almost about 24%, which is very unprecedented. I mean, if you look at most of African countries, the highest is about 17%. So Ghana seems to be at the higher rate here. So I guess the IMF is giving us a good portion. The problem we find ourselves as a country now that does not really give us an opportunity to listen wide. You know, we need the money. The government needs the money badly. So government will look at the market conditions and see which time they will enter. I'm sure the finance minister is looking at July with some positive figures with macroeconomic indicators. So then it could enter the market. That's basically what I think about it.
Now, for the finance minister, we could actually take advantage of this. How do you see that happening?
No, I do not understand why the finance minister would say that they want to take advantage. Advantage of what? That I don't understand, because we have, the risks are high. The risks are high. Investors who are looking at Ghana at the moment see that the ability to be able to sustain this economy in the next few years are high. I mean, after the century consensus, both the monetary policy and the fiscal policy of governance came out to say that if even we are going to see any macroeconomic stability, it is going to be in the second half of 2015. And that is even some projections some of us are not very, very comfortable with. Because if you look at government revenue, we'll still be hitting below target. Government expenditure is still high. Fiscal indiscipline is still high. You know, so it makes it a very uncomfortable situation if the finance minister will want to say that he wants to look at the market conditions and then take a decision on that in July. I think July is too early a time for government to look at raising the third Eurobond. It is going to give us a higher yield. I mean, we are going to pay higher in terms of rates for that bond, and it is not good.
The IMF, like you said, has raised these concerns, but what are the real risks involved if we indeed go ahead to issue more Eurobonds?
I mean, one, you should look at your debt portfolio. So if you have a high debt portfolio, you should understand that much of your revenue is going to go into debt servicing, and that will also mean that you will have to divert. Most of your infrastructure development or funds will be affected, and therefore you have to use those monies to pay off your debt. Now, if the other risk is that the private sector is also going to suffer a lot because your rates regimes are higher. So the private sector will have to borrow at a higher rate. That affects a lot of sectors. I mean, if you look at the unemployment situation, it is going to affect unemployment situation.
But Sammy, one would imagine that once government decides to go onto the Eurobond, then it gives the private sector more space for domestic borrowing.
You know, unfortunately, we are looking at it from an angle where government has also recently released a 3-year bond, and which was very successful. And if you consider the rates, now it is about 24%. Interest rates currently is about 24%. That is one challenge that we have not dealt with. The other thing that we should also be wondering, I mean, we should always be asking questions about that. With the second Eurobond that was released, which areas did these monies benefit? Which areas did these monies go? How has government accounted for the 1 billion that it raised recently from the European market through the Eurobond? You know, we should be able to be accountable for all these. And that is the risk. That is one risk, in a sense that if we are not able to have that money paying itself back in the next years, that upon maturity, we will continue to raise more bonds to offset our maturing debts. And that is the critical condition that we might find ourselves in. So I believe that what we need to do is for government to be transparent and accountable for what we have been doing with the monies that have been raised in the past. And then if we see that these monies are going to take care of itself, then we do not have much of a problem. Then we will all support government to raise more debt, because it is very important that most countries raise debt on the international market, and that's the way to go on the international market. That it doesn't disturb the domestic market as well. But when we don't have accountability for these monies, that is a risk that we should be worried about.
The finance minister has always said that going to the IMF it's never been off the table. With the kind of situation we are faced with when it comes to our foreign debt, should we look into going to the IMF? Because there's been we've heard some analysts say that the fact that we go to IMF alone could give us some credibility. We could have some of our interest rates coming down.
You know, the IMF story is something that I believe that we should not play with. I mean, that is the way to go. We have lived with the IMF and the World Bank since the Fourth Republic, and I think that one way or the other, they've been helpful to this economy. The IMF can be a thorn in our flesh, one way or the other. But in the times like this, you will want to also leech on them to be able to help you straighten up. You know, one thing I always say is that it is good to use the IMF somehow to correct the ills in our system. The IMF government will want to leech on the IMF to say that and introduce some policies.
Right, I think we've lost Sammy there for a minute. So Sammy's back, right? Sammy, so you were saying?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, please go ahead with what you're saying. We lost you over here for a minute.
Yeah, what I was referring to is that sometimes it is important to leech on the IMF, because the IMF is one arm that government can use to correct some of the challenges it is facing. some policies, government can't use its political will to implement them. But unleash it with the IMF. They can blame it on the IMF. Look at the subsidies on utilities, removal of subsidies on utilities, for example. It was a clear IMF policy, and government introduced it so that government would take it itself off the huge debt, the huge burden of paying for subsidies on utilities. But that is a clear IMF thing. So I think that it's an evil that we can't do away with the IMF. And for me, I think it is good sometimes to go to the IMF to help us straighten some policies that we have.
It is the time now.
The time is now. I mean, the economy, the Ghanaian economy is moving through a transition. I mean, after attaining the middle income status, we are moving through a transition. And that transition is a very difficult transition. You know, you need your donor partners to support you to move into that transition. So you can't do away with the IMF, where you have raised your GDP, you have rebased the economy, and your GDP figures has risen to a level where you don't have most of your donor support coming in to give you budgetary support. The only place to go for now is the IMF and the bond market. And that's clearly what the government of Ghana is doing.
But for many Ghanaians, the concern is the fact that, like you mentioned, the bailout will always come with some structural reforms as the strings attached to the money given us. But we want to see, we know that is going to happen. But how can we make it better for the Ghanaian people? How can we convince the Ghanaian people that indeed this bailout is going to come with some strings, but the strings could actually be to, you know, our growth?
I mean, it's a matter of, yeah. I mean, it's a matter of government being truthful and being transparent. I mean, we've seen we can use Rwanda as an example. Rwanda is one economy that after the genocide, they've been able to transform their economy to become one of economy that is averaging 8% GDP growth. You know, they use the IMF somehow, but they were able to inform the people of Rwanda that this is the challenge that we'll face after a long time in genocide. So if you're able to inform the people that this is the challenge, and then be truthful. I mean, this subsidy issue that were removed, government was not truthful that it is out of the IMF conditionalities, you know, that we need to introduce these things. So you just need to be truthful to the people of Ghana by telling them exactly what it is, what the implications are. And then I guess the Ghanaian is like a pregnant woman. They give birth and they forget about all these challenges, and then we move on as a country. We are going through dire times. I mean, very difficult times, and some of these things are there as a correctional policy to correct some of the ills in the past that is sending us to high debt, that is sending us to very unstable macroeconomic conditions. And basically, these are the things that we need to do.
Yeah, then let's just go with the thinking that we didn't need the IMF to bail out of our economic situation now. I want to find out, why can't the country just go for very long-term Eurobonds to give it time to be able to raise the money for the yields that come with such bonds?
I mean, that's a very good question, but the point is that we also have to be prepared locally. Domestically, we can do certain things. I heard the finance ministry, the minister during the budget, during the 2013 budget, that they were going to look at how they can also raise some capital locally by issuing the district bonds, you know, the municipal bonds and some other bonds. You know, we should have the financial, we should be able to reform or review our financial system in such a way that such bonds can be raised locally. Because look, some of these monies are going into district capitals and district funds. I mean, to help in some of the infrastructure development within the district, that the district itself can take care of itself. And then government would think of some huge infrastructural development, like the gas project, for example. You know that the gas project is one project that when it comes into stream, it will help us solve most of our energy crisis. You know, that is one key thing. So if we let ourselves out of some some petty constraints and be concentrating on what we could do to shift this country into a very much transformed economy. I mean, transformed economy where those structures are out there to support us, like have a very strong financial sector to be able to support in sectors like this. I guess we'll not be talking too much about when government goes to, and then, you know, most of the problems that we find ourselves today is because of governments, well, one, because of corruption, and two, because of fiscal indiscipline. And trust me, if you're able to work on these two elements that are eating this country up, these problems that we are having, we will not have it, because revenues will come in and will go to places to support avenues that will help, and that will help this economy to be more productive, and it will transform this economy. It will transform. Now we need a big transformation in this economy. The transformation is not happening, and that is the reasons why we are going through these challenges.
What other alternatives could we have to these two?
I do not say that the bond, I think that going into the international market to raise bonds is a good thing. It's a good thing. Bonds are good. What we should do, yesterday, for example, I read in a newspaper that they are going to review the property rate tax and all that. These are good measures that could bring more revenue. You know, it is not acceptable when government continues to introduce new taxes, right? It is not acceptable. It stifles the economy. It brings the economy to a halt if you continue to introduce new taxes. What government needs to do is to be productive in widening the tax net. For example, when I saw the issue to do with the property tax, I was happy because if you look at the properties in this country, which are owned by very rich people, how many of them are paying property tax in this country? How many of them? And these are the people that are also taking huge rents from the poor, and they are not paying property taxes. But these property taxes can go a long way to support government in its revenue agenda. So if we are able to review the property tax system that we have in this country, we'll have the rich paying more. The rich will be paying more, and government can get more. I was seriously against the issue, the introduction of the 2.5% in the VAT in the VAT, because government was just finding an easier way of increasing its revenue, and that is affecting the poor. I was looking at very innovative way of widening the tax base, and if you are able to do that, let's go to most of the districts. You know, there are a lot of let's go to the airport city. Look at how many of the new buildings are springing up at the airport city. Find out how many of these materials that are used there are locally manufactured. They are all brought outside the country. You should tax them more. If you tax them more, they will tend to use local materials. How many of the shops that we have here will you find locally made produce in Ghana? If you tax those people more, you get more money because they are bringing imported. There's an import substitute that we should do by using taxes. That is where to go, and then you get more money, but rather taxing the poor and the poor becoming more poor in this country. That's one thing that we shouldn't do.
Would it be that easy to control imports here in the country, especially when we barely manufacture anything here in this country?
You know that is a question I just hope that we should encourage ourselves not to ask, because if you look at the American economy, before you send any produce to the if an American economy wants to control imported goods, the American economy will find ways of introduce some phytosanitary requirements in the goods that you are bringing. They will tell you that it does not meet their standards, so that good will never enter the.
Right, we've lost Sammy there again. Hopefully he'll come back online pretty soon. Well, Sammy is back. So Sammy, you were saying about the Americans and how they managed to impose taxes on their imports.
You know, yeah, I was saying that, look, we should apply that method.
The central bank in February this year
import chicken in this country, one local farmers in this country. We should be able to put taxes, heavy taxes, on import chicken. What do that? You find opportunity to produce because there is no substitute apart from local. You know, there's so many ways doing, and it's all a policy direction. Implement. Don't say that all those policies are there. They are there, but they are not being implemented. I mean, I was part of the team that went to stage, and you could see that if you look at the 2001 and 2002 national dialogue, if you look at the documents that was prepared, about 80% of what was prepared in 2001 and 2002, the national dialogue that was held in that time, are not being implemented. So the point in raising another consensus, to say that they are going to solve. Let's go back to what we have already stated in those documents. We have already documented. What we need to do is start implementing that. We have a leader who is to have a political dedication.
Well, have we lost Sammy again? Right, Sammy. Let's just wrap up with this one. All of these wouldn't be easy with the current state of the cedi. I understand we have the worst depreciation on the African continent so far.
Just I can't hear you too.
Right, Sammy. I'm not sure we got that. I think we've lost Sammy.
No, I didn't get you. Yeah.
Right, Sammy, please go ahead quickly.
I did.
Right, we're having a very terrible line via Skype with Sammy, but we'll get Sammy back over the telephone and then finish this conversation properly. But let's